Did any of you make strategic mistakes in your youth? Now, some say I was a dreamer, but I was not the only one. My father was a dreamer as well. But it's funny how those dreams from God can sometimes get you into some trouble. 17 years old, having a dream about a God who told me about all of these shocks of grain bowing down to me. Just lovely old me. You know, Rachel was my mom, and I was certainly my father's favorite. He gave me a splendid coat of color. But there was just something about my brothers that bothered me. They always seemed to be excluding me from the family games. They always seemed to be talking behind my back. Perhaps they recognized the way in which God's hand was upon me. But when I told them about my dream, do you believe that they didn't receive that with rejoicing? That God had told me that all my brothers were going to bow down and worship me? Go figure. Well, that's just the way it was. You know, my family was perhaps a little different than your family because, you know, my ancestors included my great-grandfather Abraham, my grandfather Isaac, my father Jacob, and my 11 brothers. Yeah, you read in the story about my family, and it's filled with lies, deception, and backstabbing. How about your family? You know, when you just thought you could pull the wool over somebody's eyes, somewhere down the road you get fleeced. And so it was with my family. Yeah, I told my brothers about that dream, and then my dad sent me out to check on him. And once I went looking for them, I found them, but they were up to no good. You could see it in their eyes. They were plotting something. I showed up with my coat on. I thought they were going to be rejoicing when they saw their brother Joseph, but lo and behold, they stripped my coat off and they threw me down into a dry well. They put a rock over the top. No matter how I yelled or shouted, they were not letting me out until finally some travelers came through, a caravan of camel traders, and they took me, bound me, and they hauled me all the way to a distant land called Egypt. Unbelievable. I didn't speak the language. I didn't eat the food. I didn't know anything about their gods. Now I found myself in slavery. From significance in my father's house to slavery in Egypt. But God began to work things out. And so the story unfolds. I began to tell others about the dreams. I helped to interpret the dreams that they had. And before long, I found myself in a place of significance, only to find, no matter how I tried to be faithful, I found his wife. I found his wife to find me so attractive. Now, I understand that. I was quite an attractive young man back in the day. But my mistake was leaving my robe in her hand when she wanted to, you know, chat, if you will. So I darted out, but they didn't believe me. I found myself in prison. And once again, now the Pharaoh heard that I was there, and he had dreams. So I began to interpret his dreams. I want to say this to you. Despite all the suffering that I faced, and mind you, it was a difficult time, God never forgot me. God remembers us in our circumstance. So once again, God honored my ability to interpret dreams, and before long, I was the Secretary of Agriculture in all of Egypt. Because you see, this was the Pharaoh's dream. There were going to be 7 very fat or abundant years coming, followed by 7 very lean years. So we started out on a building campaign. We bought grain at low prices because farmers were eager to sell from all over the region to us. There was such an abundance. We bought everything we could get our hands on. We built barns and silos. We had grain coming out of our, no pun intended, out of our ears. But then the 7 lean years come. Perhaps your financial advisor has said to you, past results don't determine future results or behavior. Isn't that right? And so it was. The 7 lean years came, and lo and behold, I had my opportunity, because here came my little old brothers who sold me into slavery. They came from the distant land of Palestine down to see, yes, indeed, me in my fine robe. They didn't recognize me, but I recognized them. Have you ever been angry at somebody and you have their face etched in your memory, just like Mount Rushmore? You can't forget a face. Well, so it was. They didn't recognize me in my new position, but here they came squirming on their little knees asking for grain. Well, they had tricked me, hadn't they? So, I have to be honest and say I tricked them right back. I put my special cup in their backpack, and we put all their money back in their backpacks so that when they took their grain, it looked like they stole, and I sent my armies after them. We brought him back, and I demanded to see my brother Benjamin, who had not come with them. They got down onto their knees crying to me. Do you think I was going to let him off the hook? No way. I wanted to see Benjamin. It had been years, and he was my next of kin. He and I shared the same mother. Well, here's where it ended. Eventually, my father, my brothers, they all came. And I revealed my true identity. I admitted my deception. We wept together. We ate meals together. But God blessed us. God blessed us richly. And we found that there in Egypt, God was with us, even in a far distant place. You see, God works for good, even in difficult circumstances. So I say to you, how about you? How about your family's story? God takes us from difficult places, and He never forgets who we are. God comes to us in the midst of some of those pain-filled times and reminds us that God is always with us, no matter what mistakes we have made. In my own personal story, after I graduated from seminary, something that my parents really invested hard in. They were really proud of the baby of the family becoming a pastor. But my sister and my brothers weren't pastors. They were doing great in their professions. And when we came all the way home from New York, my parents put the word out there that they pretty much expected when little Brenty came home that they better drop whatever they were doing, wherever they were, and that they must come and be a part of the family and church. Now imagine for a moment if you had plans with your family and you had to cancel those plans and you had to drive 2-3 hours to come and be a part of a church service with your little brother there because of expectations. How would that feel for you? No matter how I tried to say it, mind you, this wasn't just simply my parents' mistake. I made my own share of mistakes, but what the end result was, it put some cholesterol into the arteries of my family. And we continue to try to work through that and try to stay connected, try to reconnect, try to find our way to function as family without parents serving as the operating glue. What Joseph found, what we find so powerful in the story of both the Old and the New Testament, this family from which Jesus himself comes, is that no matter how much dysfunction exists in our family, God gives to us as believers in God the gift called forgiveness and the commitment to reconciliation, to making things right. And so in my family, we continue to try to see how we might try to open up avenues of new communication. Try to work towards some forgiveness and healing within the family. So I ask you, how are things working in your family scenario? Am I preaching to the choir here where all your families are running like brand new smooth engines? Or do you in fact have some cloggage in the old fuel tank as well? I assume somewhere in some place, many of us in fact do. That's the power of the story that we're celebrating this year as we read through both the Old and the New Testament in this remodeled and cleaned up version called the story. Because one of the things I really appreciate is they have not cleaned up the stories. You know the story of Joseph and his mother, as well as Bilhah, Zilpah, and Leah, his stepmother. These 4 women that are all involved in Jacob, his father's life. And out of that comes all of these 12 boys. There is a lot of stories of sibling rivalry, of jealousy, of backbiting, and even intrigue in the negative sense of it. And what I appreciate is it didn't clean up all those stories, because these are real life families, and God continued to still intervene and to try to redirect and tried to bring forgiveness and healing in and through their lives. In that same way, God never gives up on us as well. No matter what the brokenness might be, no matter how a marriage or another relationship might have failed for you, no matter how it might be a relationship that's strained at work, or maybe as a result you find yourself outside of work, no matter what that might be, God gives to us as followers of Christ Jesus the gift of forgiveness and the ability to seek to make things right as best we can. So we don't seek to hold grudges. We seek to release them and to work through them, that we might experience healing and power within. And God comes to us even in the midst of those struggles, not to perfectly fix them with some kind of magic wand. They take work. Relationships, frankly, can be exhausting and painful. But as we work through them where we are able, we begin to see signs of God's blessings. Because God created us for relationships. That is the thing that matters most in life. Both our relationship with God, but also our relationship as family and relationship as community. So I conclude today, as we end this focus in this story for this day, knowing that there may be some relationships where, quite frankly, there just is no room to move. Because it takes 2 to be able to make a relationship work. And if one is resistant, if one keeps their foot on the brake, we must simply honor that, as difficult as that may be, and to move forward. We wait for the opportunity, if it ever comes, to be able to repair that. But in the meantime, we step in and we work at the relationships God has given us. That's what we see in the story of Joseph. God never gave up, and in the end, Joseph and his family are reunited. And God blessed them even in a distant place so that they could be a blessing to others. In this world and in this community in which we live, those who live outside of faith, I do not know how they work at relationships when they blow apart and when they don't have the gift of forgiveness and the commitment to reconciliation. It's got to be extremely painful. So God sends us out from this place into our vocations, into our workplaces, into our families, into our neighborhood, to be people who practice and work at allowing the love of God to flow through us as we exercise forgiveness one with another, to heal what we can, to let go of what we can't fix, to let go of shame and guilt because we've been unsuccessful in fixing it, and asking God to guide us and lead us in the midst of it. This is what gives us hope. And I'm extremely hopeful in the midst of what can appear at times to be a hopeless situation here in northern Illinois, here in Winnebago County, the most underwater community in all of the United States. I believe that's going to continue to turn around as God releases creativity and enables us to discover the many gifts that God has given to us. This is a great place to live. This is a great opportunity for us to live as we come alongside and share the hope, the love, forgiveness, and reconciliation that God gives to us. May God bless us all as we seek to be a blessing where we are. Amen.